I'm Jen Bosworth Ramirez.
And I'm Gina Polici.
We went to theater school together. We survived it, but we didn't quite understand it.
20 years later, we're digging deep, talking to our guests about their experiences and trying to make sense of it all.
We survived theater school, and you will too. Are we famous yet?
Old people with physically problem with my heart and my
Well, speaking of old people, you've got to watch.
Okay, tell me about this. I looked it up and I'm like, what is even happening here?
Okay. Do you know what the Villages are
No.
in Florida? Okay. The Villages is a retirement community in Florida. It's the largest retirement community, definitely in the United States, maybe in the world. I'm not sure. And it has 130,000 people live there. And it's just a gated, well, it's not technically gated, but it's considered a gated community. And they made a documentary. Apparently the guy who made it is very young. He's not on social media. I can't find him. Lance Oppenheimer.
Okay.
Oppenheimer. Anyway, beautifully shot documentary, but also just fascinating. It chronicles these 3 or 4 people, including a couple where the husband decided, I guess maybe later in life, that he wanted to start using drugs because he wanted to expand his mind. And they never really drilled down on the drugs that he was using, but he got arrested for having marijuana and $5 worth of cocaine.
Oh, he was doing drugs.
He was really doing drugs. But he was my favorite because his whole thing is he just wanted to get to a spiritual place quickly.
That is amazing.
And so there's these amazing shots of him. One of them, everybody drives golf carts everywhere. And one of these shots, he's just screaming, driving headlong into a sprinkler in his golf cart because he wanted the feeling of the sprinkler on his face.
I love him already.
I love him. He's amazing. Although it did make me think twice, because I've always said if I live to be 90 or 95, I'm going to start doing heroin because, I'm going to go out anyway and I would never do it otherwise. But this is making me rethink it because it really took a toll on his wife. Oh. She was really, she said he was always eccentric, but then he became downright unusual.
He became William S. Burroughs.
William S. Burroughs. Yeah. By the end of the documentary, he had stopped doing the drugs.
And then he had to go to. Can you imagine if he becomes a recovering addict and he's
he's like 85 years old. So that was one couple, and then there was oh my God, there's this man. Of course, his name is Dennis. Every Dennis out there is a ne'er-do-well. This guy didn't live in the Villages. He lived in his van, and he was hoping to snag a rich lady. So that his whole thing was about, and there's this scene, and it's just so poetic. He's lying down. I don't know how this cinematographer got in the van, lying down on the makeshift bed in his van, looking up, no shirt on, looking up at the ceiling saying, I just want a good looking gal he must have said it 3 times, a good looking gal who's easy on the eyes, who won't embarrass me.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, the gall of you.
You live in a van down by the river.
You live in a van and you're saying that you need a woman. I mean, you don't even have this woman. You don't even know this woman. And you're already criticizing her for embarrassing you. He finally finds one of these women that he had known before. And she knows the deal. She knows he just wants a place to live. And he starts saying, it seems to be going all right. And then he starts saying, listen, you can either have comfort or freedom. And I just don't know if I can be, I just don't know if I can be tied down.
Oh God, go get back in your van and get the hell out of here.
Yourself, Dennis. Go drive that van off of a short pier.
Yeah.
I mean, the world does not need another Dennis.
No,
honestly.
Dennis.
It's a great movie, though.
Okay.
I think you would really like it.
I'm gonna watch it. I was gonna watch it last night, and then I thought, oh, I'd better write. So I did write some.
Oh, good for you.
But I love the idea, and I love the idea of, and that's great fodder for scripts, right? Of a guy who lives in the who's a drug addict who decides to become a drug user at 84 or whatever, and then decides not so much, like after he has some run-ins with the law, probably.
After he has some run-ins with the law. They even had video of him in court, and the judge saying he was actually such a really nice guy, but he got real obstreperous in the court. And the judge said, "You are the rudest person I have ever had to deal with," because he decided he was going to represent himself.
Oh,
and he
no.
just kept saying it was only $5 worth of cocaine. It was only $5 worth of cocaine. And the judge is like, "I don't care how many dollars. It's a crime, sir." Anyway, it's worth watching.
Okay.
It's called, for people who don't know, it's called Not Just Like Heaven, Not Far from Heaven, Not Heaven's Gate.
You said it in my
some
text.
kind of heaven.
Something like heaven?
A little piece of heaven.
All right. Okay. It is called
some kind of heaven.
Some kind. You had it. Like some kind of wonderful, but movie, but some kind of heaven.
Hey, let me run this by you.
Right. So I was thinking about this idea of letting go and seeing what the nets bring in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I have done that I've only done it for the last 4 days, and the results are kind of astonishing. And like I was going to ask,
Really?
well, yes, in terms of, so I said, you know what? I'm going to do that. And immediately my anxiety about not just writing, but acting started lessening. Cause this and listeners might, if they're, whatever, like that I have had struggled with, stage fright, and as I said, I'm just going to let go and see what the nets bring in. I've done a lot of work on myself and on my career. My anxiety about acting decreased in terms of my stage thinking of negative fantasies about screwing up on set or something. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got this audition for a pilot that of course shoots in Chicago and is a recurring character. Dude, crazy. But
somebody really wants you to live in Chicago.
And I'm not going to, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
But but the character is this wild, crazy alcoholic mother that is awesome. Anyway, the point is, do you have evidence in your life? So I have evidence now that when I quote, let go, and it's not even something I'm doing in the world, it's a mental shift. Do you have evidence for our listeners and for each other that when you have let go of the idea of something wonderful happens? That's my big question this morning. It's a big question.
It's a great question. And the automatic answer is yes, although now I'm trying to comb my failing memory. That's another topic for another day. For examples. Yeah, I mean, I just know that whenever I find myself with a stranglehold on something, and I usually actually notice it physically, like I'm physically tense trying to hold on to whatever it is, that's not where it is. And I have to stop and I have to relax my shoulders and I have to take a deep breath. So just in the overarching sense of, even if I'm driving and I find myself, like it doesn't work and it's better just to relax and come back to your center. But it kind of does tie into the thing that I was going to run by you, which is about, can you cultivate patience? Because you and I had a offline conversation about me feeling like I need to make up for lost time. And so I would say I am not where you are with the career stuff. I aspire to be where you are, because I think I'm still very much in the frame of mind of like, it's not happening fast enough. It's not shooting up in the right direction. It's not, instead of what it is, which is going great, actually. Like it was only 1 year. We only started this podcast like 4 months ago. We only started writing together a year ago, a little over a year ago. So like, why the rush? But I do feel this pressure of rush. I think I mostly feel it because I feel guilty that I'm spending all of this time working on something that is not earning me any money.
There you go.
At the same time as my husband is going to work every day, working as hard as he possibly can so that I can be at home working for no money. I feel a lot of guilt about that.
That makes sense. That is a real thing. And that has to contribute, right, to the making up for lost time feeling.
Yes.
I also think that it's interesting. I see the story that comes to mind, and we can totally cut this if you're like, no way, Bosworth, is the story of was then your boyfriend and now your husband showing up in a fedora with a cigar in the rain. Yes. Once you had let go of the idea of being in a relationship with him. And he came back in the middle of the night. I have this like whole story in my head about that because it's very
completely
dramatic.
True. No, right. It's completely true. Okay. It was raining. He was wearing a fedora. He knocked on my door it wasn't quite the middle of the night. It was really late at night, unannounced. I had no idea. And I had been, he broke up with me. I was devastated for 2 weeks. And then I just went on a tear. I started dating left, right, and center. And I think that's what he thought he was going to do. And instead, he just started regretting his decision. And and as soon as I let go of him, he showed up. Yeah.
And then there's the choice, right? So like when we let go of something and it shows back up, do we choose to let it in, or do we say, actually, no, and I think that that's also a very interesting thing. It's like when I do let go of my stranglehold on my career and an audition, a big audition or something, whatever comes back, how do I embrace it? How do I approach it? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this self-tape. It's going to be super what it is. This character's really, really great in some ways, and I love it, and I'm going to do it. But I could say, you know what? I'm going to choose not to. It's just interesting to see when the nets come back in, do we throw the fish back out to the sea, or do we eat the fish?
Well, but wait a minute. Why would you be seeing what the nets bring in and then be rejecting it, though?
Well, I think that's also a product of fear. Like a lot of times I've seen with people around me and former clients and things like that the thing that if we haven't really worked on the issue, if I haven't really addressed the issue of why the fear's there in the first place or something, I'm apt to sabotage it when the nets bring in good fish. I'm apt to say those fish aren't big enough, they're not good enough, they don't smell right. And instead now I'm really at 46, taking me to 46 to be like, no, I like what this, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to accept the fish that comes back in my net. People are going to be like, what is wrong with Jen? Why is she obsessed with fish? But the point is, the stranglehold, right? The stranglehold is real tempting because we're a do society, and especially as women, especially as all kinds of things you could say, especially for. But what I'm saying is, for me, and what you did too, you thought, oh, when the fish came back in the middle of the night wearing a fedora, did you have to think about it, or was it an immediate thing?
My recollection is that I invited him inside to talk, and I was just like, listen, whatever. I don't remember the content, but I said, here's what went wrong, and I'm kind of moving on. I think it came down to, he just said, will you give me another chance? I mean, I think he was very earnest about the fact that he was owning up to the fact that he let me go, not the other way around, and that he made a mistake.
That's a great thing that he was able to do, because can you imagine if pride or whatever had gotten in the way of that trying? And look, you could have said no way. You could have said I'm done with this, but it worked out, and thank gosh it did. But I just, it's being open, I guess, being open to things looking a different way than I think they should look.
That for sure I can really relate to my having a tendency to reject that whole thing. I wouldn't be a part of any club that would have me as a member. Once somebody does accept me, I'm like, but why? What's wrong with you that you want to accept me? And that's something I would very much like to get over.
I have the same thing. I don't have it to that degree. I have other things, but I can totally relate.
Today on the podcast, we have JP Cabrera, John Cabrera. John is a writer, a director, a performer, and a tech entrepreneur. And JP is just a near and dear old friend of mine. We had sort of lost touch over the last decade or two, and we've reconnected. And I think when you listen to this interview, you're going to know exactly why I think he's so hilarious and special and wonderful. So please enjoy our interview with John Cabrera. So interesting. Loved how you tied monetization right there at the end. Very good.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, congratulations, John Cabrera. You survived theater school.
I did, yeah. Gosh.
So most people that we talk to really haven't thought very much about theater school in the last 20 years, but you are really close with a bunch of people who you went to school with, so that might not be the case for you.
Oh, it is the case. I really haven't thought much about theater school at all. I mean, I don't think any of us do. We're all, you know, I mean, we're all really close friends still. We see each other all the time, and like we might throw out a theater school reference like once every 3 or 4 years.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, because your relationship has totally evolved, and it's not based on theater school anymore.
Not really, no. I mean, even after theater school, we a bunch of us started a theater company together, and then everybody went off to Los Angeles, and then that our identity kind of was shaped by the things that we were doing out here, either individually, like, you know, the shows that we were that we were on, or that we were working that we were working on, or the stuff that we were doing collectively, like, you know, making a short film or you know, something, doing a play. Well, we didn't really do any plays, but, you know, yeah, you get it.
I get it. Did you audition for a bunch of schools? Did you always know you wanted to go to a conservatory? What was that whole process about?
So I went to a magnet school for commercial art. I auditioned interviewed for a magnet school in Miami for commercial art that would take me away from my neck of the woods and put me on the path to being an artist, because as a kid I'd like to draw and all of that. And so I had like a little portfolio of stuff, and we used that to get me into this magnet school. And I was there for 9th and 10th grade. My area of the city, 9th grade actually was the last year of middle school, but in this other area of the city, it was the first year of high school. That was a little odd. So all my friends were still in middle school, and I was like going to this high school. I was there for 9th and 10th grade. And I discovered very quickly that I was not anywhere close to as good of an artist as every other kid there in the class with me. And so that kind of bugged me a lot. You know, I just didn't feel good enough. And and then I also, like, you know, was really missing my friends a lot, you know, because I was going to this other school, but then, you know, after school and on the weekends, I was hanging out with all the people from my area, and I was making new friends at the school, but it was just really, it was tough. And in my 10th grade, in 10th grade, I took just randomly a drama class, just as one of the electives, like in 9th grade, I had taken a creative writing class and really liked the teacher. And then in 10th grade, she was teaching a drama class. So I took her drama class, and I just really fell in love with it and felt like I was really good at it. So that was a big thing, right? Because I felt like
Right.
I wasn't very good at this thing that I was there, or it wasn't that I didn't think I was very good. I just didn't think I was nearly as good as any of these other people. So I just felt like I was at the back of the pack. But in this drama class, I really I felt like I was good at it, and I really enjoyed it. My sister also, sort of side note to it, my sister is a dancer and was in ballet for a very long time. So she at this time was a little girl in ballet school, and they were doing a production of the Nutcracker, and they needed boys to play townspeople. So I did that, and then got my first taste of like a massive auditorium of people applauding you, right? So that mixed with like this drama class that I was taking, and at the end of my 10th grade year, I was like, I don't want to go here anymore. Like I want to go back to like my real high school, and I want to see all my friends, and I kind of want to do theater now. And my mom, of course, who had pumped a lot of money into the whole art thing, was disappointed, a little resistant at first, but then she was like, yeah, let's do it. So I went back to my normal high school, and I got really, really into that drama department there, which was like a really big deal. Like the school won a lot of awards, went to these big theater conferences and all of that stuff. So it was actually really like suddenly really exciting. And there was this big little community that I sort of was a part of there. And so by the end of high school, I was just so clear that that's what I wanted to do. And I was set on Juilliard, right? Like a lot of young, high school kids. That was my thing. My sister at that point was already she was already living in New York, and she was dancing at the School of American Ballet, which is right next door to Juilliard. So in my mind, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, perfect. I'm going to go move to New York, and now my sister will be right next door in the dorm room next to me, and all of this stuff. Just really imagine that. And so I auditioned. And then I also started getting I got DePaul sent something in the mail, and Ithaca College sent something in the mail. And so there was going to be a big audition in New York City for all of those different schools. And so my mom, we went to New York and auditioned for all of them, Juilliard included, which was the one that I really wanted to get into. And
well, do you remember what you did?
Yes, I do. That's why I'm laughing.
Oh,
good. So for Juilliard, I had to prepare a Shakespeare piece, and I think also a contemporary piece. For DePaul and Ithaca, it was just a contemporary piece. And so the contemporary piece that I picked was a monologue from that play Equus, which back then was just oh, that's super. You're really cutting edge there. Doing Equus. Every third kid did Equus for their.
Dave DeSmalshin did Equus. I think it's come up actually 3 times
Yeah.
so far.
So I did Equus, but then for my Shakespeare piece, I did Mark Antony from Julius Caesar, and I went into my Juilliard audition, and I did it, and I did it in a British accent.
Of course.
A very, very, very thick and affected British accent.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm gonna just tell you right now, it was awesome. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it. It was a damn good monologue, and it was awesome, and I was in it to win it, and it was a really thick British accent. And I finished it, and they looked at me and they were like, very nice. Could you please do it again without the British accent? And
that's exactly what they did to Dave. That's so funny. That's exactly what they did. Verbatim.
And so I did it again without the British accent, which of course I couldn't do. I had practiced it so much with a British accent that suddenly I was 18-year-old John Cabrera, insecure, nervous John Cabrera as Mark Anthony. Like, you know, I can't even remember the actual word, but just imagine me, my voice, not doing anything Shakespeare-y in any way, delivering this. And it was just like, it was just disastrous. You know, I came out of there, I was like, you know, all of these months that I had been preparing and so excited and convinced that I'm going to Juilliard, my sister, I'm going to be right there. And I was just crushed. And then of course, like, you know, they put the list up on the wall. That's the first, you know, it was my first experience with a list up on the wall kind of thing, and did not see my name on there and was just like, just crushed. And then
was that callbacks? Was that, so did they do callbacks within that audition, or was it just people on the list?
No, they did callbacks within that audition. I wasn't on the list of callbacks even, right? Like it was really like, like the British guy that I did, like that guy probably could have gotten onto the list.
That guy graduated.
They weren't.
Juilliard.
Yeah, that guy graduated. But John Cabrera was not on that list, and so I was, you know, I mean, yeah, of course, I was sad, and you know, I like walked like back to the hotel where my mom was waiting, and I was just like, got there, I think I like just broke down in tears like immediately. And then I think it was either the next day or something like that, was the bigger audition that was like the consortium audition that was going to be like for all of these different schools, which Ithaca was one and DePaul was another. Jim Ostelhoff was the person auditioning me, and I did Equus, and it was good, and it was good, and I could tell that he really liked it, and I think he gave me a note, you know, to adjust it, and I took the note and I did it, and you know, I mean, that piece works really well for like an 18-year-old kid, you know, like it just like it fit me. I think that if you had any chops as an actor and you did a young monologue from some play where you were playing your age, you probably had a really, really, really like a much higher chance of getting into those schools than if you tried to do, well, Mark Anthony from Julius Caesar. So and then I got back, and you know, and then all of the kind of like sadness of like the Juilliard thing was replaced by like a lot of excitement, because then I got an acceptance letter from both Ithaca and DePaul. And in fact, the person from Ithaca was really pushing hard for me to go there. They really wanted me to go there. But it was the difference between going to like a small college town versus going to a city. And I went and I visited Chicago, and I was just like, it was sort of the closest thing to what I imagined my life would be if I was living in New York. And so I was just like, I want to go here. Like, this is great.
When you were talking about saying that your audition was good, and like you would, to this day, you really stand behind it, that just brought on this flood of memories of conversations that I would have with you where you would just be arguing with me about a note that somebody gave.
Oh yeah, that has not changed.
Perseverated and belabored.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask.
That's like my life. That's my life. That's not even just a creative thing. That's like my life with my wife on issues, on domestic issues. Yeah, I mean, that's me. Right. Yeah, I'll never change. I'll always be somebody that's constantly like pushing back.
It's good to know who you are. It's good to just, you know, be self-possessed. Oh. So then you really weren't the typical kid who like wanted to be an actor your whole life and had a bunch of experience with it. So then what did you think? Day one, week one, what did you think of the training?
Of the theater school?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess when I first got there, I was really enamored by it all. I'd never really had that kind of training or that I'd never had that experience. So, you know, in high school, it was like, you know, you do a little bit of like theater game stuff, but mostly you're like most you're doing plays, you're getting ready for some big play, you know. So it just felt very, I don't know. I felt like I was a part of some special club of people who had this like secret for how to become an artist, and you know, all these different teachers at the school all had like one little piece of that larger secret to give you. I was quite enamored by it, I'd say, in that first in that well, let's say maybe that first trimester or two.
Okay.
Then I'd say by the end of the year, things start to get a little wacky. Maybe even like by the second trimester, you're starting to get a little worn out by the repetition of it all. You're starting to get a little annoyed by the same tricks that you're seeing all of your fellow classmates doing. And then, of course, I mean, I'm sure you've talked about this with everybody, but then when the warning aspect of it all, then things just start to really get wonky, and people start really competing with one another, whether they're consciously competing or unconsciously competing. It just starts to get really, really weird. And that first year, I mean, you know, they cut, like, you know, when we were there, they cut so many people. And a lot of those people were just like, you know, like they were part of the wackadoodle of it all, right? There were just some people there that were just like, what are you doing here? Or like, not even from a talent perspective, more like where did you come from?
Right.
And then, yeah, there was just like so much weirdness. And I think that, you know, to me, it felt like a little bit like their MO for who they chose was like kind of throwing a lot at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so you also start to feel like, gosh, am I just like something they've just thrown at the wall, and like, will I stick or not, right? Rather than was I actually chosen because they thought I was truly, truly talented, you know? So that kind of gets in your head a bit. You know, outside of the theater school, remember, we're also going to a university, which had its own separate dynamic outside of the theater school, right? Which is like the dormitories filled with like lots of people who are not theater school related, and all of the community and interaction that you have going there. The proximity, the distance, the sheer distance from those dormitories to the theater school. I was from Miami, so I had never experienced a winter like that in my life.
And we should tell our audience that the winter that we started theater school was the worst winter Chicago had in 20 years, and there was multiple days where the news would say, don't go outside.
That it's like hazardous for your health.
Yeah, and like I remember trucking to movement to music with like a self-portrait we had to bring in, and it was like snowing. I was like, what? Who cared? What? Yeah.
Well, I developed this habit of like taking my showers in the morning before school, like all throughout high school, and so I would always kind of arrive to school with like slightly wet hair, and at the theater school, the distance you'd have to walk, I would arrive to the theater school like with a helmet. Like my head was completely frozen, you know? It's like, I mean, that's just one example of just like the weirdness that I was thrown into. Like I used to like walk into school with like ice all over my head, which I'd never really experienced that before. And so, I mean, it was just all wild, you know, and like, I experimented with drugs for the first time in my life that first year. I had a mental breakdown in the second half, I guess, of that year. That was actually inspired, or it was jump started, I guess, by the drugs that I had been taking. I was I was like my roommate at the time, who just I became really, really close to during my years at the school, certainly during that first year, but throughout most of my time at the school. He was not at the theater school. He was in the music school. But he sort of opened me to so many like music. Like I just like my whole like music renaissance began. Like I'm like a kid from Miami suburbs. Like all I listened to was top 40s. And suddenly I'm like listening to the Smiths, and I'm listening to all of this like Aphex Twin and all of this like new stuff that's just like changing my world, and start smoking pot. And then at a certain point decide that I want to start doing mushrooms. And I just my first mushroom experience, I just chow down like a huge satchel of mushrooms. And
you didn't have anybody telling you how to do it?
No. So suffice it to say, I had a horrendous trip that then sort of broke me mentally for the rest of that year. I had like high anxiety all year. I was really like just having all of these like new thoughts about like just all these existential thoughts that I'd never had before as this like kid from the suburbs, like, just all kinds of stuff. And was also having a very difficult time even incorporating any of this new stuff into the education there at the school. Like I was actually having a hard time. I was having a hard time functioning, really, and I was in this. I should add, because I feel like this kind of is related somehow. But I was in Rick Murphy's improv class, right? You either had Avcali or you had Murphy, right. And I had Murphy, and Rick was a very intimidating man. I know that people who had Avcali said something similar about him, but Rick was intimidating, I feel, in a different way, because I developed a relationship with Avcali as well, which was sort of related to I got to know him in the second year. But with Rick, I really felt a lot of those feelings that I mentioned that I was feeling when I was back at that commercial arts school. A lot of that was coming back in my classes with Rick. I felt like I wasn't good enough for him, that and it really was getting me down, like in a bad way. And then you add to it this whole like mental breakdown thing that I had, and I felt like I was just worthless in regards to like the school, and convinced that I would be cut because I'd gotten warned, and I just couldn't find my stride at all. And then at the end of that year, you do your first scene, right? Because up until then, all you're doing is improv, which I just couldn't do. I couldn't get my head into it. I always was just thinking too much, Yeah. Like that first year, it gets better though. So at the end of that year, we do scenes, and I picked this scene, this Sam Shepard scene from this kind of small play, the small Sam Shepard play that I can't remember what it was called right now, but it was this really weird abstract play. And Eric Slater and I did it. And it was super weird and super crazy, and partly maybe because of how sort of messed up I was mentally at the time, I just clicked into it in a way that was just like the first thing that I did there at the school in the full year that I'd been there that I thought was like really impressive. And I felt it. And Rick was like, whoa. And later he called me to his office, and he basically told me, like in like no subtle terms, he said, like, I like, you'd be gone if it wasn't for that scene. I did not think that you had that in you. Like, right, which kind of was a little freaky to hear. But that, it was sort of, that was also, I learned Rick Murphy's way of complimenting people through like, through a sort of strange, I don't think he was trying to be mean. He's so frank on that stuff. I think he was being honest. So the next year, that's the year of the scenes, and Rick Murphy chose me to be in his workshop, the one that, in the one that he was doing, which was like also like, oh my gosh, like I thought he didn't like me, and and it was really that scene that I did at the end of his first year that got me to do that. That was the adding machine.
Oh, I was in that one.
Yes.
Right. And you remember, so the adding machine, and then I had that monologue, that big monologue there, and he was really, really pleased with what I did there. So much so that he, in front of everybody, like kind of gushed at my performance, which got me super embarrassed, But Av Kali saw the adding machine and then came up to me afterwards and was like, I want you to join my first year improv class and come in, right? And of course I'm thinking I'm not good at improv. That was the part that I sucked at. It wasn't until the scene came in they did. But I was so excited that he wanted me to be a part of that of course I did it.
Yeah.
And it was in Av Kali's class that I started to understand what improv actually was. And I actually kind of started doing these really great improv scenes and whatnot. I don't think I ever really found a love for improv, but I certainly suddenly understood it, that I didn't really understand it during that first year with Rick.
Were you the husband in Adding Machine? The guy, the main
Zero.
guy?
I was Mr. Zero. Well, we were all Mr. Zeros. There were 5 Mr. Zero. He basically took Mr. Zero and he broke it into all of these different things. And I got Mr. Zero's big monologue, which, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of lucked out there, right? Because I got to just chew up the scene, right? I got to do, had any of the other guys there gotten it, Jeff Brown got a Mr. Zero. If they'd gotten that, they would have also gotten to completely chew up the scene and just, made waves there. So that was I was sort of lucky there. I think that Rick gave me that largely because of the scene from the year before. I also got the Fixer, which was this other weird kind of character that appears in there. And that was also super fun and super stylized. But yeah, I
remember, can I just interject? What I remember about your Mr. Zero, it was heartbreaking. There was something heartbreaking about it in the best possible way.
Because it's the part in the play where Mr. Zero is begging. He's begging for his existence, really, right? Because the adding machine's about how sort of technology's coming in and taking away everybody's purpose and all that kind of stuff. So it's this monologue, and he's begging for his existence, and I guess I think I've always been able to tap into that sense of desperation and self-loathing.
Yeah. I have always wanted to do that play, by the way. I stand that play.
It's a great time to do something like that, right? The time, I think that play was written during the Expressionist period as a large response to industrialization and all of the effects it was having on society and the workforce. And we're seeing and that was turn of the century, right? Now we're turn of the new century, and we're seeing almost this mirroring of what happened 100 years ago happening with information technology and the internet, and how once again, what it means to what the workforce means is changing, and what your place in the workforce is changing, and economic disparity between classes and whatnot. So I feel like somebody could do, well, you could do a faithful rendition of it, but I think that you could also probably do some sort of interpretation, new interpretation of it, or maybe there's even an opportunity for a new revision of it. Somebody takes the old play and writes a new play where they just inject all of that adding machine stuff with internet stuff instead, tech startups and all of that.
Oh, and now it's in the public domain because
it's that's correct. Yeah, it's from the 1920s, so it would be in the public domain. Yeah.
That's very good. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about besides the Adding Machine, other shows that you did and what your experiences, good and bad and ugly, were of the other shows.
Let's see. I did Detective Story, which was another workshop. That I thought that was an enjoyable experience. I did a Nick Bowling piece, which was The Visit.
Yeah.
And
shows together. That's crazy.
We were in a bunch of shows.
You guys did, all
The Visit.
shows together.
The Visit was, I don't remember what I played in The Visit. It was a very ensemble show, but I really liked the show from just like I liked the writing and I just liked the concept. Everything about that show kind of geeked me out, even though I don't think I had any role to play in it that was substantial. Like I think I want to say like Eric Slater got like the lead role in that, or somebody got the lead role in that like maybe Russell Harden or something, and Anne-Marie Welty had the main role, and then I think everybody else was just like townsperson or something like that, which was a trend, by the way. We all know this. It was a huge trend at the school. It was like 2 people who would get the actual role in the play and everyone else is the ensemble. Right. Problem, I think that was a big problem.
That's a problem.
That I think soured a lot of people, and that was, I think, a problem in choosing the plays, right? Like what plays were chosen, and that goes down to like why the plays were chosen, and then when you sort of like take that path down, it really leads to a professor who wanted to do that play, right, perhaps professionally, and so they've got this great little pool of guinea pigs that they can use to justify their desire to do something in a professional sense. That's my sort of in hindsight, looking back at it, my interpretation of that. Whether I'm right or not, there's no question. It was a problem, I think, that so many plays had these big ensembles with like 2 characters, and even more so that a lot of the same people were playing those 2 characters, right? People who had a look about them, that really lended well to leading man or leading woman, right? So there was that. Molly Sweeney, that was a play that I did that I absolutely loved. Colleen Cosgrove and I were in that show together, and I forgot who the other person was, but I want to say it was a 3-person play. It was just 3 people doing monologues, and the monologues themselves sort of tied the story together about a woman who was having who had cataracts removed from both of her eyes that had made her permanently blind her entire life, and this new surgery would give her sight again, and doing so essentially made her crazy because she wasn't prepared for all of the visual stimuli that came with sight after not having had it her entire life. And I want to say that the character I played was the doctor who did it. So there was like a lot of similar like themes of regret and self-loathing and all of this stuff that like I felt like, maybe it was that crazy thing that happened to me in my freshman year of school that allowed me to really like just tap into that stuff really, really well. So, and then, and came out of that show feeling like I had done something really impressive that affected people. And of course that made me feel good. Gina, you and I were in a show together, which the name of it totally eludes me, but it was where you and I met, actually. It was where you and I really became friends. It was called The Lovers, I think, or something like that.
With that British woman.
Yes, I can't remember her name. She was French. She was actually French and British. Because I remember she would speak French. I mean, she was speaking English most of the time, and it was very British. But she also had her husband was French, and we did that together. That was an interesting play because that was a workshop. So of course workshops were like they were second or third class plays, right? They were what you did not want to get when you walked up to that, to that list on the inside of the door.
The workshop
and
pool. They called it the workshop pool.
The workshop pool was just absolutely awful. Even just calling it that, right? Like the workshop pool just was like just awful.
Like the cesspool.
Yeah. and I remember, like always, getting up to the door, seeing that I wasn't in a main stage show, that I was in the workshop pool, it wasn't even going to be a workshop that was in the black box. It was going to be in an elementary school classroom. And it was called The Lovers. And, I just walked into that experience, just, as bitter as I had been about any of the other ones that I did. But that director was really infectious. She was such a sweet woman, and the play was cute and quirky. And
Anne, her name was Anne.
That's right, Anne. Oh, shoot, I forgot the last name.
And she directed for Timeline, I think, because her name has actually come up once before, and I Googled her after that, and she still lives in Chicago and directs plays. She
was wonderful. I remember that whole experience.
Wakefield and
Wakefield. Right. And anyway, she sort of turned this experience that both you and I came into annoyed and bitter at, right? Into this just very very lovely, charming little play that we were all really proud of, and that got really great feedback from everybody who saw it. And you and I became friends during that play. At first, I think we bonded in from the annoyance of the whole experience perspective, and then by the end we really loved the play and we really were having fun. We were a lot of joking in the green room. I remember.
The thing about I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the thing that made that, it was all about her. It was all about the director. It was all about the way she really and truly treated us like the children that we were, who needed nurturing.
Yeah.
That's really what it came down to. I mean, I understand why the theater school had this very tough love, whatever approach. Yeah. But at the same time, we really flourished with the nurturing.
Absolutely.
Just saying.
Absolutely. 100%. I'll never forget her husband came to opening night and he gave us a standing ovation. Just her husband, everybody. He stood up and I forget the French term that they use, to laud you with praise from the audience, but he was doing that, and I'll just never forget that. And it sort of seemed to be a part of that whole experience and a part of that nurturing thing that you're talking about from her. And I really came out of that experience very surprised by it, because I came into it very angry, very, very upset. And
go ahead.
I was just no. I was going to say, I think that some of the faculty, may have sort of taken that, that experience that some of us had, where we came in, sort of bitter about something, but then came out I think some faculty would say, well, that was part of it. That was part of the tough love, whatnot. I don't believe that that's true. I actually think that it was Anne, I think that it was something that we didn't often see there. A lot of those workshops were we have to remember, with MFA students. So they were students too, right? So how could you expect to get that kind of a nurturing experience from somebody who was only a few years older than you, right? So special people like Anne were not that common.
No.
In the at least there in the 90s when we were there, in terms of those shows. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I was gonna say before you jumped on, Gina, I was just saying that my experience of John is that he was so funny that I said, when we were on crew together, that this gentleman is going to be on a Saturday Night Live. Like I never laughed so hard in my life, and crew was a miserable experience, but you made it tolerable because I knew every day. So I'm wondering, were you in shows where you got to showcase that later on? Like you should have been the star of the show.
Not really. I mean, first of all, like I only was on the main stage twice, and one of those 2 times I wasn't cast on the main stage. I was given a little like small bit role in a main stage show. So my only main stage experience at that school was in the chorus of Merrily We Roll Along.
What?
That was my only one, yeah. And that was the one where, Gina, I don't know if you remember, that was the one where you helped me do this photo shoot that I did because Betsy Hamilton was the director, and she had, in the first week, we had like an assignment as the cast. We had to come in and do some sort of a presentation to the rest of the cast about dreams and shattered dreams. I remember she said, like, she was walking to the school one day, and she looked over to the side and she saw a mirror that was shattered in the grass. And that was the impetus for this assignment that we all have about broken dreams. And of course, at that point, I'm in my last year at the school. I haven't had any single chance to shine on the main stage. My last opportunity now here is in this Merrily We Roll Along thing as a chorus member, which was literally just person in the background dancing and singing in the chorus. And so I was just like, I'm like, okay, I'll give you broken dreams. I'm going to give you some broken dreams. And so I approached Gina, who now we were like fast friends because we had like, we'd gone through The Lovers together, and we both again experienced the defeat of being in the workshop pool. My reaction to that was a little different from Gina's, but
it's okay. The cat's out of the bag. We already told the break in the door story.
Okay, good. And so I approached Gina. I was like, hey, I got an idea. I want to do this photo shoot where I want to sort of, through a series of images, I want to recreate my experience discovering that I was cast in Merrily We Roll Along.
Oh, shit!
And so we did this whole photo shoot with me like auditioning, then me like, and then me like walking up to the door, me looking to see where my name was, then me like falling into the door, sliding down the door. And then what I did is that I had those photos developed, and then I printed them all onto white Fruit of the Loom t-shirts that I got from Kmart or wherever. And I put all of them on one after the other. And then I put like my main shirt over the top of it. And I showed up, to that day, and people were looking at me like, what's wrong with that guy? Like, there's something going on with JP. Has he put on some weight, or, because I was like really puffy, and everyone was going around the room. They were going around the room doing their thing, and everyone was looking at me like, because everybody's got like dioramas and big posters and all this stuff. And JP's just sitting there twiddling his thumbs, and they're thinking, there's something up with JP.
We don't know what it is.
And also, some of them are thinking, JP didn't do it. Like he once again just didn't bring in his assignment, and he's going to come up with some excuse, for why he doesn't have his work, because that was also another trend with me, is that I just didn't like doing homework. And so they got to me, and I stood up, and I was I've been thinking a lot about this, broken dreams thing. And, and I realize it's true that I do have a broken dream that I want to share with the class.
Oh my God.
And then I just proceeded to remove t-shirt after t-shirt
and threw the t-shirts to people because everyone was dying laughing, including Betsy Hamilton, and they all wanted the t-shirts, right? Like they were me, so I'd like tossing people t-shirts across the room by the time we got to the end of it, and like Betsy was like on the floor. And I mean, of course, she knew what I was saying, which was, I really, really, really don't want to be in this stupid show. Really? But she also couldn't deny that, like,
brilliant.
That she walked into that, right?
Yes. This is amazing. This is the best story I've ever, and I can't believe I didn't remember anything. I mean, I wasn't there for the presentation, but now I remember taking the photos.
Brilliant.
We went into the
brilliant.
Yeah. And so that, and then that show was, that show I would never say got like, I never had like any epiphany, like, oh wow, I shouldn't have given this such a, a bad rap early on, given her such a hard time. In the end, it was like, I was in the chorus of Merrily We Roll Along. It was pretty dumb. I don't think that I got much from that performance, but I really enjoyed my time goofing around on that show, which it was my first main stage show. And I would have to imagine that this happened in every main stage show, which was just like people like mooning each other from the wings, just all kinds of weird stuff. Pass the penny, people like passing the penny across the stage, things that you just didn't do. You just didn't do them in the workshops because it was too small to
you were
done. And so
there was no backstage. Really.
Yeah, so that was my first opportunity to experience all that fun theatery goofiness that you get to experience at the Reskin. And that was very enjoyable. And I'm glad that I at least got to experience that once. I think there were some people
somebody told us a story about you being... Bradley Walker told us, were you in Sisterly Feelings?
That's the other one, which I was not cast in. That's the other one that I said. I've been in two, but the only one I was cast in was Merrily We Roll Along. That was the only one that was like technically a part of my actual casting. I played Major Lidget in Sisterly Feelings, which is just a character who they talk a lot about throughout the play. And then at a certain point in the play, because there's like one of the 6 or 3 different, outcomes of this is that they go to this race, this big outdoor lawn race that they've been talking about in previous acts. And so if you happen to go in one of the directions, you actually get to see that race. And they've been talking about Major Lidget throughout the piece. And if you happen to see that one thing with the race, Major Lidget has a very, very small like role where he just runs slowly. He's like an old man. He runs slowly across the stage while he's being taught, while they're asking him questions. He doesn't actually say anything. He just runs, little old man runs with his his jersey on and his marathon number, and he crosses the stage. And it's funny, it's a funny moment because he's a little old guy and whatnot. And Sean, I auditioned for that. I auditioned for the role and was called back for the role that Sean Gunn got. And like all of the main stage shows, I was disappointed that I didn't get on a main stage show, and that was a role that was sort of in my wheelhouse to play. But Sean was he was an upperclassman, and Sean had also not gotten any really great casting. So it made sense that he got that. And Sean and I were already developing a pretty strong friendship. And so they actually petitioned Bill Burnett. They actually said, cast JP as Major Lidget. He would be great. He's really good at characters, at doing all that kind of stuff. Which sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier about Jen, or asking earlier, did I get a chance to play any of that kind of like character-y stuff that I had been doing that was a little more comedian? This would probably be the best example of it. And it didn't even come from casting. I actually was cast in another show that trimester, and I was in that other show. And so it was that, and then I did this little small part as Major Lidget, which was fun because, I got to
I got to be in a show with all my friends. Like, Lee was in that show and Sean was in it. Sean and I were in the same dressing room. So we got, we put on the makeup together. And unlike everybody else, I only had one particular act that I was in, which wasn't always going to be, right? So I'd have to get all my makeup on, get ready, and see whether or not the coin flip went my way. And if it did, then I'm on. If it didn't, take off all the makeup. But there was something actually kind of fun about that too. So I actually got into the whole, I got into the fun of just the whole theater experience there, mostly because it was my friends and we could all laugh about it. And if I didn't go on, that was part of the fun. And then afterwards, we all went out to a bar and stuff. So that was actually, I'd say that was definitely a highlight show, even though my role in it was, it was basically nothing really.
You'll have to listen to the episode with Bradley Walker. He tells a sweet story about you guys.
Yeah,
Bradley was in that. I remember.
Yeah, he had to wear the shorts for running.
Yeah, Bradley was also in Merrily We Roll Along, if I remember correctly. So it was like Bradley, Eric Slater, and Louise Rosette. Those were the three those were the three characters. Everybody else was just set dressing, basically.
Right. Oh. Well, I want to be mindful of the time. I know you probably have to go, but just really quickly, I mean, we didn't even get to talk at all about what you've done since you graduated, and so we'll put it in the show notes, and everybody who's listening to this either knows you or knows you from television. So we'll have to maybe have a part 2 for the conversation. But tell us what you're doing now.
Right now, I'm actually working on I'm working on a tech startup. I'm actually I'm building a tech product that a platform for collective myth making. So I'm trying to build a platform where communities can come together and build their own Star Wars sized universes together, rather than pump all of their creative energy into the IP of Warner Brothers and Disney, right? Just billions of dollars worth of value through memes and cosplay and fan fiction is basically just going right into all of these big IP that the fans really have no control over and certainly don't see any participation, in. And so I several years ago, I started getting obsessed with this idea that all of that energy could be focused towards them building their own, their own Star Wars, their own Lord of the Rings, their own Harry Potter, and that they collectively control the creative direction of it, its evolution, but also can participate in its monetary success if it were to have that. And so I've been on this multi-year journey to understand what that would look like, how you could ever incentivize a group of people to work together on something like that. A group. I imagine that this platform could potentially it could potentially attract as many people as are on Twitter, right? How would you ever incentivize and track everybody's contributions to understand what everybody's value is? That took me into the world of blockchain and into the world of cryptocurrency, which is, a technology that I think has a lot of promise in that regard. And this past year, I've learned a bunch of coding languages and have actually built some actual tech and some prototypes and whatnot.
That's amazing. Is there a place where people can stay updated on what's happening with that?
Not yet, because I haven't really made it really public yet. But once I start making it public, I have a website that's still behind the curtain that I'm going to be releasing that will allow people to stay up to date through an email list. I'm going to be doing I'm really into this idea of doing sort of a regular Clubhouse room in which the first starter world that we're going to be creating together, that I'm going to use Clubhouse to introduce that world through these like weekly kind of fake history lessons of the world, like geeky, nerdy history lessons of the world. And that hopefully will attract people who want to write, create content in that world, join the community that will essentially be building that thing from the ground up. And then I'm working with a few really cool, talented people who I pitched the idea to, that like geeked out about it, that have skills in everything from publicity to JavaScript. And right now, I'd say like 2021, I'm sort of dubbing as the year of team building. It's the year that I'm like looking for folks who like the idea, who dig it, and think that they can bring value in some way. And there's so many ways that people can bring value to this and kind of come in as a sort of team member from the ground up. Like I said, everything from like publicity and, I'm looking for I'm right now looking for somebody who's like an economist who wants to come in and be like, okay, you basically are building a little, in-game economy. Let me make sure that you are doing it right and it doesn't collapse, or you don't have overinflation or any of these, I feel like I'm kind of having to figure all of this stuff out myself and become a sort of jack of all trades. But as we know, a jack of all trades is typically a master of no trades. And so at this point, I want to, I've been doing a lot of it, getting it to where it is by myself. But at this point, I'm going to need some masters to come in and own some parts of this. That's what I've been doing now.
That's exciting.
Yeah. You know that my past for, like the last 20 years has been like a smattering of entertainment industry stuff, from like, I had a role on Gilmore Girls for 5 years, and then I started writing, for studios and television, and did that for about 6 or 7 years. And now I'm really obsessed with this and trying to make this work.
Obsessed is this whole time we've been talking, because what I usually do when we talk to people that we know, which has been almost everybody, is I kind of like pull out a theme, and I'm sitting here thinking like, when I encounter your spirit, I feel it so completely, but I was having a hard time naming it. And that's what it is. It's obsession in a good way. It's obsession with your imagining of how the world can be, your obsession with self-betterment, your obsession with like a kind of a rigorous standard for how things should be.
Yes.
And your your obsession with telling people when it's not up to standards.
I remember you said something to me a long time ago. I think it was during The Lovers. You said that I was really, you said I'm a very, very perceptive person, but that it's not because I'm very perceptive of other people. It's because I'm a perceptive of myself. You said that it was sort of your way of saying like, you don't really pay attention to other people. You pay attention to yourself, but somehow through your constantly observing yourself and observing the problems in yourself, you sort of figure out how to engage other people.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you were 20 years old then.
Yeah, of course.
It's a much different story now. And I'm so glad to have you. If you liked what you heard today, please give us a positive 5-star review and subscribe and tell your friends. I Survived Theater School is an Undeniable Inc. production. Jen Bosworth Ramirez and Gina Polici are the co-hosts. This episode was produced, edited, and sound mixed by Gina Polici. For more information about this podcast or other goings-on of Undeniable Inc., please visit our website at undeniablewriters.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.